Welcome to the Be Bold podcast. I'm Beth Whitman. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. This is where I feature conversations with women who have inspirational stories to share. These are women who are on the cutting edge. They are kicking butt in major ways and forging their own paths to success. They come from a wide range of backgrounds and find themselves in an equally wide range of stages in their lives. The one thread they have is that they are bold in what they do. They follow what they love and somehow create a lifestyle that supports that. It's when we hear stories about other people's success and triumph over obstacles that we become inspired. Really, it makes us feel like anything is possible. I personally believe that we all have the ability to become better versions of ourselves, and what I'm hoping is that you'll find pearls of wisdom in these conversations, bits of information that inspire and motivate you. I'm hoping you'll hear something that makes you want to change and make choices in your life that ultimately makes you happier and more fulfilled. Please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast in iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Play and leave a review or just give us a star rating. That is so critical to building our Be Bold community. For this episode, I sat down with Diane Winston while I was in New Orleans. I first met Diane when she came to Bhutan with me on one of our WanderTours a number of years ago, and we've remained friends ever since. Diane served in the Louisiana State House of Representatives until mid-2008. And spoiler alert, Diane and I are not on the same side of the aisle, as they say, when it comes to politics. But we still have a tremendous amount of respect for each other. I knew that I wanted to speak with Diane for the podcast, but I wasn't quite sure how the conversation would go. It turns out I was really pleasantly surprised because Diane is a huge advocate for women. Women in politics, of course, but also for women being bold and women getting out of their comfort zone. She understands all too well the reality of living and working in a male-dominated world, and she's learned skills that have helped her navigate that, especially when it comes to politics. Having served in a male-dominated career for a long time, Diane has some really strong opinions about the roles and talents of both men and women, and she's great at giving credit for both sexes, but she's realistic in terms of what holds women back from being more adventurous and risk takers. As I was editing this episode, I constantly had to pause so I could take notes. Diane, she's a strong woman with some great observations about how to navigate the world. Sure, she talks some politics, but don't worry, this is not a political discussion. Diane, who is 68, talks about retirement and how in her retirement it's easy to start second-guessing herself. We talk about how women are always going to be the primary caregivers and, as a result, tend to put ourselves last. Because I have a couple of friends interested in running for office, we talked about why more women don't run, but why they should. So if you've been thinking about running or you have friends who are, this is a good one for you. We talk about the importance of setting goals and ticking things off a task list and why women need to learn how to be better goal setters in order to increase their satisfaction, gratification, and prosperity. She believes it all comes down to having a fire in your belly, a passion, and that is the key to being successful and happy. With that, enjoy this conversation with Diane Winston. I'm so excited that you're here and that I'm in New Orleans because it's a city that I absolutely love, and I'm thrilled that you're here. We met in Bhutan on a trip a number of years ago and really clicked and have stayed in touch over those years. So when I'm in town, we try to get together and spend a little time together, and I really value that and appreciate that. So thanks.
And I do as well. Yeah. I'm thrilled you're in our beautiful city and that you've had such good weather.
Yeah, absolutely. I know it's been just gorgeous sunshine. I hear that there's been a lot of rain lately, so I've been fortunate about that. The reason I wanted to chat with you, it's a couple of reasons, and we'll get into the second one shortly. But we have something in common, and that is travel and adventure. And I want to talk about your adventures, and you've done something very interesting recently. We'll we'll get into that and kind of hear the details about it. But you just relatively recently returned from Machu Picchu in Peru. Is that right?
That's right.
So how did that come about, and what made you decide Machu Picchu? It's a beautiful area. Lots of people go to it, but what was the draw for you?
My father was a pilot for Braniff, and was based my first 5 years of life in Peru. And I had never returned, although I was always leaning toward it.
Your first 5 years?
Yes.
Oh, were you born there?
Yes, no, but my mom actually got on a plane and went to Dallas to have me and then brought me back. So I was there from babyhood until my first year in kindergarten. And I have, I don't know, just an inclination.
Do you have memories from that time?
Yes, I do. I have some.
What do you remember from that time?
Well, I remember crazy things. I do remember an earthquake. But again, I was only 5 when I left, but I remember going to school. I remember my dad getting the assignment to take me to get my hair cut, and he got it so short that when we went back home, I thought my mom was going to divorce him. She was so angry. I remember we had a cook named Berta, and I was always in the kitchen with her. I don't know, I just remember little things, not a whole lot, but I was told I spoke Spanish, and so now I'm not completely fluent in the grammar, but when I do speak, it comes right back. And I'd never been back, and I think just the busyness of my life, I think your listeners need to know I'm 68 today, and the busyness of my life, and then politics, and then family, I just put off a lot of things that were on my bucket list until I did retire. And then that was one of the first things that I wanted to do, and was so happy to do it. But I had second thoughts before I took the trip, but got outside of my comfort zone, said it's now or never, and took it. And oh my goodness gracious, loved every bit of it.
Well, let's go back before you go into the more recent time there. So you were in Peru, and then where did your family move to when you left the country?
It was Dallas. Braniff was based in Dallas at the time, and so I was born and raised in Dallas. And the only reason I got to Louisiana is I went to LSU, married a New Orleans boy, and stayed in Louisiana. Have been here since I graduated LSU in 1970.
So your heart is here.
My heart's here, but us Texas girls still say, "Where are you from, Diane?" I'm from Texas. But yeah, Louisiana's been a fabulous place for my kids to grow up, and for me to work and represent a constituency when I was in office, and play. It's a good place to work, and it's a good place to play.
Yeah, it sure is. So you decided probably a couple of years ago, I'm assuming, that you wanted to go back to Peru, or how long had that been brewing for you?
It just kept coming up in my life, but it seems so exotic and dramatic, despite the fact that I went with you to Bhutan. That was pretty dramatic and exotic.
Dramatic, not traumatic.
Oh, not traumatic.
Okay,
no, not traumatic
Just
at
wanted to
all.
make that clear.
Dramatic and exotic to me. But I don't know, it's just things got in the way. Maybe my priorities didn't start kicking into, Diane, you deserve to do this for yourself, until recently. By the way, I think more women need to say that to themselves more often, and not wait till they retire to say it. But it was like, I'm going to do it. I can do it. I can afford to do it. I'm going to do it.
What were your hesitancies, either over the years or more recently, about going down there?
Well, it was really more recent. My last job was the one in politics. For 12 years, my schedule was hectic. The circles I ran in were crazy and full of, talk about drama a lot of times. And then you retire and you go, okay, what do I do now? Well, I'm just going to relax a little bit. And then you go, oh my goodness, that lasted about 15 minutes. Now what am I going to do? And and I didn't really want to go back to a work that would tether me when I'd gotten the taste of some of these more exotic trips, like the one with you to Bhutan, which was a fabulous experience. And I thought, I need to do that before I get too old to do it. Well, then, Beth, I'm saying, okay, Diane, you're nearing up to 67 now. You're not as fit as you used to be. You like to travel alone, but maybe now's the time to get companions to sort of do the group thing. In other words, I came up with every reason not to do it. And I thought, where did that come from? I'm pretty bold. Beth didn't have to tell me to be bold. And now, does retirement do that to you? Do you just all of a sudden start second guessing? I don't know.
So
anyway,
you're still married?
No,
you're not. Okay.
That happened exactly when I was term limited. At age 60.
In politics, when you were in politics.
Right, politics. Age 60, I was term limited, couldn't run again. My husband of 40 years decided he didn't want to be married anymore. And I thought, and I left the home that I'd been in for 35 years. And so it was a lot of converging challenges that I think made me feel older than I was, and therefore second guess, not self-confidence, but I made excuses not to do bold things. Mm-hmm. And
not to challenge yourself.
Yeah. But I got over that as well, thank goodness.
So how did you get over it in terms of Peru?
Well, first of all, I'd already paid for it. That was a big thing. After canceling it once, I still had paid for it. And then I just thought, this is nuts, Diane. You could wait your whole life to be the weight you want, the age you would like to be again, the person you'd like to be with to go. You could wait and miss the opportunity, and you're not doing that. You're not getting any younger. Don't wait. So
what would you use as encouragement if you were talking to someone? Because, just do it. Or be bold.
Yeah.
That's one thing. But what's more practical advice that you might give to someone who is saying, I'm kind of going through that same thing of, I want to do this trip, but I'm hesitant and I've got all these excuses. What would you tell someone?
Yeah, well, it's still kind of inspirational stuff. I don't know about it, that there's any practical thing you can do, except women are natural encouragers in my book. Natural encouragers. And I would absolutely just keep telling that person, you know what, you deserve it. Women, often, men, and believe me, I love men, but there's a difference. We're wired differently. And men don't seem to need the encouragement to do something bold, to take a risk. Women for centuries have been more risk averse, as well as that caretaking role. Beth, to me, I don't care what happens in this world, politically, economically, sociologically, women are always going to be the primary caregivers. And as a result, you often put yourself last or other people first a lot. And
do you think the fact that we are primarily the caregivers that naturally makes us risk averse, or do you think that there's other elements that play into that fact?
Well, I think there are other elements, but clearly it's a major factor of being risk averse, because it's more about, so is it that we are the major peacekeepers? Lots of times our solution, and by the way, having a role in society so different from men, and again, not just recently, but eons ago, we had our role, and then we became wired in a certain way. And in doing that, we got a skill set in doing things better than men did, just like men got a skill set that they were better than women. And a lot of it was collaboration, peacekeeping. I almost hear myself going, this is why you should run for office, Beth. I have asked Beth if she ever thought about it, because I think she'd be good at it in most ways. No, in all ways you would be. But it's that whole thing of women are good at, they want the peacekeeping. They want to find the solution that doesn't leave dead bodies on the side, but rather ends up in a win-win. But you're right. A lot of that then does make you risk averse, particularly in the area of taking care of people. But then sometimes, even in the taking care of people part, you find yourself having, some people would say, having to take a leap of faith. To get to the solution, you have to push yourself out of a comfort zone. That's the same thing as taking a risk. And a lot of women don't do it, though. Talk about other things. They don't want to look like they failed. You know, how they look, what people think of them, is something women need to get off their plates in order to get things done and treat themselves the way they should be treating themselves. Because when the woman in the family, you know, gets sick, doesn't help heal herself, the rest of the family, and the ripple effect, the community, the state, you know. Anyway, I could go on and on about that part.
Well, let's go back to that for just a second. So do you think that the fear of looking like a failure, is that all internal, or does some of that judgment come from other people, male or female? So it's a real concern to have.
I don't think those two should be the same. In other words, if the judgments are being made and you know who you are and you've got core beliefs and a self-confidence in yourself, those judgments just don't need to be factored in. They really, really don't. Now, in some cases, you know, you can't offend your boss. I don't even want to find an example of that. You have a course that you know in dealing with your life, your family, your responsibilities. Second guessing is a killer. It erodes your soul, and you're doing it to yourself if you think that other people's opinion of you matter more than your opinion of yourself.
Have you come up against that yourself?
Oh my goodness, all the time.
Okay, so even though you intellectually know it, you can probably cite examples from your past where you're like, okay, Diane, yep, I've done, what am I doing there?
Yep.
Or yes, I did that.
No question. This is funny. This is a funny story. When I was running for political office, it was the first time, it's just a little example, but when I was running for political office, it was the first time I'd ever done it. And I wasn't young. I was 49 years old. Most people start a little earlier than that. So I'm running for the first time. And so you've got these handlers, these consultants, and these people that know how it's done and how to win. And they've polled people. And so they just know, right? I am loving the whole process because it was for state representative, about 40,000 voters, walking door to door in my district, which I love doing, meeting people, hearing what their issues were, kind of doing that stuff. And so my team comes to me and goes, Diane, do you know that you touch people a lot? And I went, what do you mean touch people? Well, you go up to them and you pat them up. And I went, my district is in southern Louisiana. You know that, don't you? And I had no idea what they were talking about. But they said, well, like a man will be there and his wife will be behind. I went, wait a minute. Are you saying? No. What are you talking about? Do you understand when I hug a person or pat them on the shoulder, the next person I hug is the, the woman behind him? I don't understand what you're talking about. Well, you might just edit that a little bit, maybe a little more professional with the shaking of the hands. Oh, okay, I'll do that. And then almost the same week, somebody saying, Diane, do you have anything beige in your closet? And I went, no. Well, you're running as a conservative candidate, and the gold lame baseball hat really needs to go. And I went, oh my gosh, okay. Because, of course, they're experts, Beth, right? So this lasts about 3 minutes because I turned into a Stepford wife in order to please.
You realized it wasn't you.
No, I wasn't in my own skin. Mm-hmm. And part of my connecting with my voters is the sincerity and the passion that I can talk to people with. I look them in the eyes, and even if they disagree with me on an issue, they can see I really believe it, and they like, and I turned into, oh, do I touch it? Do I shake the hand? Do I stand back altogether? And I was just stutter stepping, and I went, you know what? They know me. They're not all going to vote for me. And if I can't be myself, the heck with it,
And people do succeed that way, though.
Oh, yeah.
All the time.
Yeah, all the time. Mm-hmm. If they don't succumb to the so-called experts or other people. And with women, it's hard, Beth, because there's a jealousy factor. And sometimes that gets to you as in front of your goals. You do care what they think about. And
other women you're talking about in terms of the jealousy factor.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And you're going, well, how can I appease her, instead of deciding that it might be her fault that she's jealous and that's why she's giving you these judgment vibrations. You just have to keep being encouraged. That's why I always tell people, seek a mentor if you're looking to push yourself out of your comfort zone. And so much of it is just being self-confident enough that you walk it out the way you want to without having to take on the extra angst of worrying what other people think. Now, this is assuming that you're doing something you're proud of and want to do.
Do you have sisters?
No.
I grew up with 3 brothers, and it wasn't until relatively recently, and it could be since I've been doing the women-only tours, that I feel like I have this amazing sisterhood, because I didn't have that growing up. Yeah. So I've kind of learned to travel with women and to be around more women. And I tell the story of, like, I didn't learn what Spanx were until I started traveling with women. I didn't know what a muffin top was until I started traveling with women. So it's really funny because I just didn't have that. I was very much a tomboy, right? But I also, and I don't have it in our group tours, and I think part of it is because of the tone that I set. At least I tell myself that it's part of the tone that I set. But I hear stories from people that women who've grown up with a number of sisters, there is that jealousy and that judgment factor that's verbalized. And I never had that growing up. So it was like it was a revelation for me, thinking, really, the stuff that I see on TV really happens out there. And so you're echoing that. You're saying that, yes, this does happen. But you become, when you don't grow up with that, you're not as sensitized to it, or you're desensitized, or you just don't notice it because you think she couldn't possibly be judging the clothes that I'm wearing or the fact that I hugged somebody's husband on the campaign trail, because that it
wasn't part of my experience.
Exactly, because it's not going on in your mind. You would never think that it's going on in someone else's mind. So It's interesting that that's
an interesting point, actually. There should be a study about that. If there probably is, that attitude, some of it is born out of not having sisters.
I think it is
dealing with that.
Yeah. The women that I talk to who have a big family of sisters, I hear that there's that judgment that goes on. So I don't know. That's just my talk about anecdote.
It just sucks your energy and parts of your soul out when you're spending so much time wondering what people think of you,
and trying to please them,
and because women are people pleasers. I got a whole speech on that one, Beth. We're people pleasers for the most part, and that's back to that. We take care of business. We want everybody to be happy. Because it's easier, in the family, in the community, when everybody's getting along, and so that was our role for thousands of years, and so it's natural for us. This may be the wrong time to bring this up, but this is it's reminding me of when I decided to run. And by the way, running for political office, the most difficult part is not the campaign, or much less serving, which is heaven to me. I love to serve. The campaigns can be. That's another story. It's the decision to run in the first place. The self-talk that a man does to himself when someone says, Bob, I think you ought to run for state representative. We need this. We're not getting the representation for this. We're a growing community and have these extra problems with transportation and economic development, and we need you to run. And his self-talk is, okay, oh my goodness, yeah. Say he's a lawyer. Doesn't have to be a lawyer. It could be anything. Say it's a lawyer. And his self-talk is, okay, my partner can take over my part of the practice, and I promised the church that I would raise $1 million for the capital fund for the new building, but I can give that to Joe down the street because he's got the extra time. Now, I know I do 2 carpools, and I take the child to hockey practice but you know what? I think my wife can, she can take that over too. So I'd love to. And by the way, I think we'll get more business out of this because I'll be a state legislator, and that'll be good for business. If it's good for business, it's good for my family. Mm-hmm. Yes, I'll run. Mm-hmm. The self-talk by women is, oh, my family's going to hate this. They'll hate the campaign. It'll be time away from them. Lies will be told, perhaps, about me, and then they'll get school, And who will take? Nobody can. Now, who'll cook for the kids when I have to? No. The church, it depends on me. The women's Bible study just won't go without me. And they have now talked themselves out of it. That's the self-talk that men and women do. And that's why you have to, if you're not naturally self-confident or learn to be self-confident, you need those mentors, those encouragers.
You can still be self-confident, because I consider myself self-confident, yet I have those same conversations with myself about other things, and it's specifically to growing my business.
Yes.
And I come up with all the excuses of why it won't work, or why I can't do it, or why I have to answer emails rather than developing a new tour, or fill in the blank.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. But that's your experience. That has been mine. But you could say that about most things. And once again, though, why don't men make those same excuses?
Some of them do. In all
fairness. Some of them do. And some of them are valid, by the way. Mm-hmm. Some of the excuses really aren't so much excuses as they wouldn't be good as a priority, And you just have to be able once in a while, when you set your goals. By the way, goal setting is another thing that I think men do a little better than women, because they've had to, in order to make priorities and things like that, and go up the ladder of success as being the provider of their families. But I like to have women be disciplined when I talk about women in leadership positions, or just having a life more fulfilled and living a life with more gratification and satisfaction in it, as well as prosperity. And that is goal setting, because you can always amend them and tweak them and change them, for that matter. But it's like a blueprint, and you follow it, and all of a sudden the action steps to getting there become more clear. And then if you get on a team of encouragers or mentors, then you're more comfortable being pushed out of your comfort zone.
How do you set goals? Do you have a process?
I actually, it sounds, now you're talking to the one who is technologically challenged, right? So I just get that old yellow legal pad out.
Good.
Yeah, I really do. And it's like the bucket list thing, or the retirement thing. I mean, when you go through a schedule that was just had every minute of every day filled with something, and then you retire, and then you're by yourself again as a couple, I mean, that status changed. You almost have a blank slate, and you can, because my kids are now gone and having their own kids, and you got to set goals, or you walk around in circles a lot. And
so you literally write them down.
I literally write them down.
Do you write them down? Well, let me tell you what I do first. I'll share and then explain your process too. So I journal every day.
That's a good thing.
Except when I'm traveling, it's a little bit more difficult because my time is so crunched. But I sit down and every day I journal, and it changes kind of morphs around, but I do write down goals. I write down on a daily basis things that I won't tolerate. And that could be me not eating properly. It could be as simple as that. I write down things that I aspire to be. I write down goals and what I consider success. So what is it? Writing a New York Times bestseller means that's part of my the pinnacle, or I'll know I'm successful having met these goals when I have a New York Times bestseller. And I sit and I write those things down. And so then as I go through my day, I think, does this decision get me closer to my goals? And that decision can be anything from eating a piece of cake to spending time on Facebook.
Yep.
Something that is clearly wasting time, scrolling through my Facebook rather than reading a book or magazine article that's going to further me along. So I totally understand. I will not journal on a laptop. I journal in a notebook that I have, and it makes it really concrete, and it kind of makes you slow down.
Exactly.
Too. So I love the idea of having the yellow legal pad for that.
Exactly. I do that, but you bring up something interesting, Beth, maybe a little too, because of the age difference, and you're you continue to, I keep wanting to say she's hitting her stride, but then at 50 you decide to do 100 marathons in 3 months, and then I go, well, maybe she's hitting her stride now, and then
well, thank you
and then
for
you're
that.
climbing some big mountain in the world, and well, maybe she's hitting her stride now. I only did it for about a 10-year period.
Well, maybe
she's making these new goals all the time.
Maybe I'll run for office when I'm 80.
Well, yeah. Listen, I think you bring a certain degree of wisdom as well as your experience. But what you're bringing up is interesting about goals, because my goals when I was in the workforce and definitely when I was in politics were these written ones with, objectives and then action steps. And I love just checking off the action steps and, okay, I'm in, and then I tweak the goals. And now, once I'm retired and 68 years old, my goals, now you seem like you've mingled yours, but my goals when I was in the workforce was always about the job and less about interpersonal things. Now it's very interpersonal because, frankly, I decided that I gave my job a little too much of me, which had to take away from something. And I was done with that. And I was going to decide what's most important to me and how do I get myself there? How do I make myself more of the kind of person I want to be in order to be the family member I want to be the friend I want to be, and to think that I deserve to indulge myself by booking a trip to Machu Picchu. And that's been quite a journey for me, but I think a good one.
Yeah, but you feel like that's been indulgent. You feel like a trip to Peru is...
Oh, yeah. I do. And I do. And it's back to, could I have been doing something more purposeful that helped people? That's definitely all about me, And then that public servant in me goes, could I have been doing something in those 14 days more purposeful to help people? And I've just decided maybe I can do it because, of where I am in my life and who's with me and who's not with me, is I've decided if you don't indulge yourself and have it be about you a certain amount of time in a week, then the rest of the world is not getting the full you when you do make it about them.
Right.
Or us.
Like the typical airplane instructions where you have to help yourself with the mask before you help someone else.
Exactly.
Very similar to that.
Exactly.
I know we're skipping around a little bit here, which is just fantastic because it's just the flow of the conversation. But let's talk about the political thing a little bit since we've been down that path. And I had shared with you before we started recording that I have a couple of friends, female friends, who've been interested in running in politics. And one, I think she's setting herself up probably in the next year to run, trying to figure out, what she wants to run for. And I think that's great. She's very purposeful about it and very thoughtful about it. And I think very determined about it.
That's good. All those things, by the way, are excellent.
Yeah, that is great. I know. Very excited for her. I have another friend who reached out to me recently who said, I've been thinking about entering politics, but my husband doesn't think it's such a great idea. And the reality of it is that it's low paying. The position that she's looking at is about $22,000 a year. She'd have to spend 3 or 4 months in the capital of her state. So it's going to take away from her home. She'd have to rent an apartment for that time because it's such a long period of time. So it would be all very difficult, not practical, too expensive, and very difficult for them. What do you say for, let's just say, and she actually expressed, she said it's really difficult for women and minorities for this particular reason, for people for people at a lower economic status for that reason, because it is so expensive. And I didn't realize that myself because I've never checked into it, and I won't until I'm 80. So what would you say to someone, a woman who is thinking about it, but has the same reservations that my friend has?
Well, it's a tough one because what she wants is maybe something she can't afford. And that's where you really have to do a lot of self-introspection. By that I mean, I don't know what office she's seeking. A lot of times a decision is made deliberatively in which you get your feet wet with a certain office that has a smaller constituency, let's say school board, knowing that you want to, gather a bigger network of contacts, get more experience in the public square, and improve your own competencies while you really want to get to the state legislature. But then you have time, then you go for county commissioner, now you have a higher name recognition, and then you can decide if it's something with a bigger constituency, and now that you've had this experience, you've upped your name recognition, which, importantly, most women hate to do this, makes your fundraising easier. You got to have a lot of those top men in the banking and insurance and the biggest industries in your area. You got to get them on board with you because they have power and influence in influencing other people, but they also provide a fundraising base. And so it's a process where you're sort of get in the pipeline and then you shimmy on up and people know, and you become, your name recognition is such that that's not such a challenge like I had my business community, because I was the Chamber of Commerce executive, behind me, and a certain name recognition there and a fundraising base. But you know what? I didn't want to be a school board member. I didn't think I'd be a good advocate for the kind of education issues that were on the table. I didn't want to be a county commissioner because transportation and economic development, as they affected small business, I was interested in, but I wanted to be in the state legislature.
Did you know that when you were with the Chamber of Commerce that you wanted to go into
No.
this? Okay.
That's the other thing. And I want your women listeners to understand this. You do not have to get a degree in political science. You don't have to do it. I am a walking example of it. I wanted to be I love small businesses. My husband and I were self-employed. The Chamber of Commerce in my area, which is just across from New Orleans, was basically small businesses. And we had our challenges at the legislature. You've got lobbyists for the big businesses, and the small businesses were just, everything coming down was just so burdensome. But I was a Chamber of Commerce executive. I loved what I was doing. I was recruited by my membership. And I tell you, there's something very humbling when a group of people, by the way, they were mostly men, came to me, and because they were the business owners in my area at the time, we're talking about 96, and actually they did 4 years earlier, and said, Diane, we want you to run. And here are these people thinking that I had enough faith in me that I could represent their issues, and family and business-wide, in the state legislature. And frankly, I was like, the pragmatist in me said, I don't know if I want to do that. That's never been on my wish list.
Did you go through all those excuses that you were talking about earlier of, I don't have the money, my family isn't going to understand it?
Kind of. I frankly, the discussion for me became more what a man would do, except for the fact my kids were just leaving high school, and I just couldn't do it, and I wasn't sure I was qualified, frankly. I knew I was good at what I was doing, but politics had never been on my radar. So I told him, check back with me in 4 years. We have 4-year terms. And I can tell you what I did in 4 years, Beth. I'd go up to the legislature. I'd look and go, oh, my gosh, I can do this. Mm-hmm. I made sure that I just positioned myself in certain ways that I could, at the same time, enhancing my work at the chamber, enhancing what showed up on my push card. That's the little quickie little piece of paper that you give to everybody saying what your qualifications are and who you are, that kind of thing. Then my kids were off to college, and I decided, yep, and the chamber paid me a lot more than the legislature did. So my husband's need to have his 2 cents honored definitely came into the mix. That's why I say the friend that you're describing, she's in a tougher position than I was, I think. I just knew, we'll put it this way, I could afford to have the fire in my belly.
Financially, you mean?
Yes.
Okay.
I could afford that part. But that's what I'm saying. She almost has to put it on paper. You got to have the fire in your belly if you are going to navigate the challenges that you recommended. That you itemized just then with your second friend, because you don't want to get crossways with your spouse, and he's got to be on board. But any spouse worth their salt, if their partner has a fire in their belly about something that serves the public, and he knows that there'll be an asset in the public square when we've got so many people using it to benefit themselves, he'll support her. The financial part's hard, and if she has children, the distance from the capital would be harder. But she's just got to determine for the next 2 or 4 years, whatever the cycle is, it's 6 years for senator and 4 years here in the state capitol. She wants it badly because she will be better than the guy that's in there now. And her community is she's going to have the fire in her belly that this is what she wants.
So it's
anything less than that, and it'll be easier for herself or other people to talk her out of.
Mm-hmm. It's the difference between must do something and should or want to do something.
Exactly.
And that is everything. It doesn't matter whether it's politics or a trip to Peru or a culinary tour to New Orleans.
It is a call. It is so loud in you that's why I say it translates to me to the fire in the belly that says, how can I make this work? I think I'm supposed to do this. I think I'm the person for that job. And by the way, your constituency, the people you're asking to vote for you, if it is politics, they'll love seeing that through your face. Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. And by the way, women, if you're listening, thinking about this, they love a fighter. I do not mean a shouter. I do not mean someone who holds their fist up. I certainly don't mean any kind of violence at all. What I'm talking about is they love to see a female up there fighting for them, but as a woman, not turning into some sort of man wannabe. They love it that you love the cause, you love the issue, you love them so much because your community is going to be the beneficiary of this. They just love that.
But there's a nuance about that as well, that whether it's pursuing something as a feminist issue or kind of playing the game in a man's world, mm-hmm. right? So how do you navigate that when it's kind of a gray line? It's not black and white. If you go one way, I don't think I'm articulating this well. How do you navigate the system when it is male dominated and you're a female working in that arena and you've got the fire in your belly and you want to work for women's issues, but it's in a man's world? How do you work that?
Well, I think it differs from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. I mentioned to you earlier, I was one of 15. I was one of 15 women in a legislature of 144 when I first went into office in 1996. Oddly, when I left office 12 years later, it had increased to 25, which doesn't sound like much, but it was an increase. More oddly to me, 8 years later, that number has decreased. Women win, they serve, and they either choose not to run again or get beaten. Now, that's another whole session about why that happens. Although races have gotten too ugly these days, just so ugly. The race itself can just be awful. As I told you before, it doesn't matter what kind of skeletons you have in your closet. If you don't have any, they'll make it up, and then put it on social media, and then it goes nuts.
Right, which is something that we talked about before we started recording too, that you said that women will be reluctant to run because they have this fear that there are skeletons in their closet. And you said,
we did polls.
Yeah.
I was head of our women's caucus for 3 years, and we commissioned a poll right before one of the elections, because we found women were telling us, no, I've been divorced twice. My folks at home aren't ever going to, think that that's okay. We did a poll on issues. Basically, will men vote for women? Or will some women not vote for women because of certain issues? And those have fallen on the wayside. That's another excuse now, because men and women are very comfortable now voting for a qualified candidate. Now, if all things are equal, will they vote for the man or the woman? I don't know what that answer is, but it's probably 50-50, It's just who comes across as able to get the job done and has the competencies and the personality that they can be proud of, they know they'll be ethical, and they can make good choices on behalf of their district. Those are myths that...
well, they might have been true at one time.
And they might have been true.
Mm-hmm.
You're exactly right. But the poll was very clear with the fact that, again, I'm in the South. And I can tell you, the way you behave as a woman in the legislature where I'm from can mean the difference between getting an ally or someone who's dismissing you. And it's not through arguing and raising your voice and much less humiliating or trying to rile up somebody. Now, I went in at 49, and as a result, I don't know, younger women might can do this too. Humor is huge. Humor is just huge in dealing with the opposite sex in the legislature and being a 49-year-old woman. I could, not humiliating them humor, mm-hmm. but rather just laughing some things off. And you use the word, I think maybe derogatorily, but I had to find myself in that situation where I was so ticked off about either the way I was treated or part of the process with a maleness that wasn't attractive or essential to the getting things done came out, that I would have to bite my tongue so often sometimes that I did make a game out of it, that I was going to win. Now, it didn't mean using my feminine wiles, whatever that means, because that sort of defeats the purpose. I mean, some women still do it in the legislature, but to me that defeats the purpose of being a woman representing people in the legislature. So, and it would be a game, and I would just figure out a way to make my points, first of all, without getting angry, because they really will, a lot of people, not just men or the opposite sex, will dismiss you. Men can get away with that, though. They can show their anger. They can show a lot more emotions in getting things done than women can. But you just figure out in your state house what it takes and you just keep your eye on the prize. You bite your tongue a lot. You never, by the way, though, let anybody roll over you. I'm not saying become a little shrinking violet in the hope that when it's your turn to talk, you can be convincing. That is not what I'm saying.
So by biting your tongue, you're not, like you said, you're not saying, being a wallflower, but really just being respectful and just knowing that if you open your mouth, it is a fight.
Exactly. And you don't necessarily need to do it in front of people either. Some of them do that as a tactic of intimidation.
Some women, you're saying?
No.
Men. Okay.
Yeah. Some men. I would always take them privately first and say, well, I won't tell you what I said. Let's just say we spoke the same language and don't do it again. But again, I tried to use a little humor. I won't even go there.
That's okay.
Yeah. Anyway, you just learn what works for you. But I am telling you, you do not have to resort to the feminine part of things in terms of making a point. You just be competent, know what you're talking about, be respectful, and use humor. And they'll respect you.
And do you think we have to work harder than men in that regard?
Absolutely.
Like be not manipulative, but be more thoughtful in the process.
Absolutely. Okay. I know that's probably not the politically correct thing to say, but it is so. But you can do it because women are good at thinking on their feet. They're good at pivoting. They keep the goal in mind instead of bombast, and they can do it. But they do have to work hard.
Eye on the prize, as you say.
Eye on the prize. And you can't legislate that. Oh, please be more fair to the women legislators. Just get used to it. You have to work harder.
To get back to Peru, let's go back there.
I can go
for
back
a minute.
there.
Yeah, because I'd much rather go back to that because that's much more fun to talk about. So you hiked Machu Picchu?
Yes, I did.
Did you do the day trip? I think there's two different options. You can do 4 days up camping, or you do a train ride and then a day.
Oh yes, so you'd be the one walking up Machu Picchu, and I saw them, and I'm going, oh my God, it's going to take them 2 days to get up, and they're walking straight up, but they did it. But no, we took the train, and that was the other thing. I said to myself, you're older than most of the group. Well, actually, there were a lot of older folks there too. I don't want to make anybody think that I think 68 is old, but I still think of myself as 45. Maybe that's my problem. But nevertheless, I knew that I wasn't going to be able to keep up with some things with the group. And guess what? I allowed myself to say, that's okay. You're there. You showed up. Number one, you didn't talk yourself out of it for the second time. And go at your own pace, Diane. As you know, I take a lot of pictures. I like to take pictures. They were always hounding me to get on the bus because I was finding those kids. I have another picture with 3 of these precious little Inca kids that we took together. But I said, I'm just going to do it at my own pace. If I get to the top, what they call the top, fine. If I don't, there's plenty of things for me to see. And I finally told myself that was okay, because I want to get to the peak. I don't want to get there the fastest necessarily, but I want to say, yes, I got to the peak. And now it was enough for me to be there. I was so happy to just be there, to get as far as I could, to do it slowly. Sometimes you see a country better when you see it slowly, or in this case, ruins. Yeah, I could have made some more excuses, and I would have missed a terrific trip.
What did that mean to you after you completed that trip and you put it behind you and you came home? Did you move on and think that was nice, or did you think, yeah, Diane, way to go, what's next? What was your response to that?
Actually, it was really a little bit more the latter. Just when I thought, okay, you can get back in first or second gear instead of seventh gear. You can do this, and it feels pretty good. And I'd said no to a lot of things, serving on boards. I'm just real up into my community. We love each other. But I thought, okay, wait a minute. Let me just pare it all down to what is it I want to do? Now, I always have the purpose of serving, and I wish we had more servant leaders. I'm not saying I'm a leader anymore, although I'm a natural group organizer, I think, except when you're organizing the tour. And then I love having it be in your hands. But I think we're missing servant leadership in this nation and maybe down to, all levels of government. Actually, it's not even just government. Leadership in corporations need to be more servant leadership, community-minded. Leadership in churches even. There's more politics in some churches than there are in the state houses. This whole idea of just serving, connecting the assets of the haves with the needs of the have-nots. That can't be that complicated.
So when you came back, you got back in touch with that identity of wanting to serve.
Wanting to serve, but still being so stoked about something as exciting as traveling to Peru and the Machu Picchu thing. And how do I combine that? I mean, you would say, well, Diane, you can still join the Peace Corps, which there's nothing wrong with that. But you can do both, or at least I'm in a position, at least financially, where I can certainly do both. If that stokes me like and I become the Energizer Bunny again, if that's what I need to stoke me into more action rather than the passive role of introspection and getting more in touch with what kind of person do you want to be, Diane? What kind of person do you, when I was in the legislature, when I was with the chamber, when I was in college, you could say, Beth, put down 20 adjectives that would describe Diane. And they would be doing things. Oh, she does this, and she does this, and she's so good at this, and she does doing things, right? I need to do this, and I will have served my community. It's more about being now. What do I want to be? What do I want to reflect when someone looks just in my face? Mm-hmm. What is it I want to reflect? Much less my grandchild or my daughter or, a new friend or my old friends, That's been a bit of a journey for me because I'm a doer. I'm a big doer. And I'm good at doing. I don't know if I'm so great at being yet, but I'm
so you're
working on that
path.
Yeah, but I'm telling you can go to Machu Picchu and sit.
And be.
It just fills my soul. A lot of places in Bhutan certainly did that as well. But I had just come back from Iraq when I went to Bhutan. And so I was still in that, how can I go over there and help that country? Like I'm the answer. But separated from that job and then being in Machu Picchu, I realized that traveling like that to places like that was a soul filler for me. For different people, it's different things. And some are more exotic than others, and some are very simple. But whatever allows me to be recharged, my recharging then goes back to purpose, and purpose for me is serving. And it used to be a constituents of have and have-nots. Now it's more the have-nots, but making the haves want to be a part of it. You know what I'm saying? My district had rich people in it, it had poor people, it had a middle class in it. And sometimes it was hard to vote on certain things when you're serving this variety of constituencies who all have different priorities in their lives. I mean, there's a thread of commonness in a lot of things, good educations, healthy environment, things like that. Now it's about taking those people who need the help and not just figuring out how to get the assets of the haves to give to them as a resources, but making the haves love doing it. And baby boomers are a perfect example. I'm at the beginning of the baby boomer group, having been born in 1948. And I know us. We grew up in the 60s. I know us. We have disposable income as retired people, and we're retiring it at this exponentially high rate. We made money, or we're successful, whatever that means to certain people, and Now we just want more meaningfulness in our giving back, which means we don't want to waste our time, by the way. Don't tell me to show up at the Habitat for Humanity build at 9 o'clock and nobody's there at 9, but they're showing. No. Don't write a check. No. I want the kind of community action where the gifting of the resource to somebody who really needs it feels more like they won, the giver, than the receiver.
Where does that come from for you? Where do you think that comes from, that desire to give? Do you think it's something that is because you brought up the baby boomers? Do you think that that's something that's more common with the baby boomers because you've got the income to do it, you're retired? Or do you think that there is something in your background that you've learned to be? Okay.
Both. And I can tell you, it is clearly the baby boomers, because there's the largest transgenerational exchange of money. It was our parents who felt they had to leave us stuff. That's less and less with the generations now. So in other words, we're inheriting money, and then we've made money, and now we want to give back, but not in a wasteful way. Less checks being given to big groups that you're not sure. Their CEO makes $100,000, so is your check really getting, baby boomers are questioning that. So it's definitely a baby boomer thing, because I know us, trust me. And plus, not every baby boomer is financially secure, but there's a lot of it going on. And I know what propels us to give. But the other is my background. I see so much waste in government. So much waste in government. And the cost of government is huge. And the answer so often is, let's just raise taxes. So now the ones who have the resources, the ones I keep calling the haves, are going, I don't even know where my taxpayers' dollars are going. And sometimes policy is making philanthropy down. Much less, I don't know where my dollar's going, and I'm fed up with it. I can't really afford it anyway. And then here's the needer. Here the person that needs it. And then all these people in the middle are being paid, the third-party contractor, and then this. And it's like, this process stinks. It really, really does. It's not serving those who have, the haves, and it's not serving those that are the have-nots. As much as I love what I did in government, Beth, I am convinced that if any change in getting there to be a more expedited and willingness to have this exchange go from those who have it, the resources, to those who don't, it's in any community's best interest. Any community. All health indicators for that community are better when those two things come together. Government has made more barriers to that happening than the taxpayers' dollars supposedly funding these things looks like it should be working. So it's going to have to happen. It's a big change. I'm talking really a big notion here of having communities start changing at the community level, almost more one neighborhood at a time. Other people need to step to the plate and let government do. Of course, my politics are coming in here now, and I don't want to go there necessarily, but the pie isn't getting so much bigger as it's just being split up into tinier and tinier and tinier slivers until you're like me in sports. I'm good at a lot of things and not great at any of them in sports-wise, right? So, transportation issues and education issues and environmental issues and foreign policy issues, that becomes what they do at the federal level, and then communities figure out a way to offer incentives for getting it back to this group of people serving this group of people, and it's all interchangeable. They may only have it for a little. It has to be done at the community level, and that takes a big, huge community discussion in the public square. Unfortunately, I hope I see it in my lifetime, because right now the public square is loud and often, unfortunately, violent.
And it's filled with fighters.
It's
like you said
filled with
before.
fighters. I don't know exactly what changes it, but let's just say I'm more person to person, group to group. If it gets to stadiums, the stadium's fine. Sometimes it does. By the way, the arts do that. You can be in a stadium. Heck, you can be in downtown on Bourbon Street and everybody starts swaying when they hear the same music because all of a sudden they're one. Music speaks universally to people in a healing way. I know I've sort of gone down. You have used the term with me and who I've spoken before. You all are going down a rabbit hole. I don't think we need to go it down because it's a big notion. But government isn't the answer. It's not the answer. But government needs good, ethical, competent, impassioned people to make policy for the greater good. And
well, let's hope we get more women in there.
Again, the balance is absolutely necessary because the tone of the discussion usually changes. But a lot of women are so used to, again, I say this as someone who grew up in the same, I think maybe Gloria Steinem and I are the same age, but growing up in the 60s when all of this feminist stuff kind of started blooming, it's always been a big fight. And you got it, and now it's just the tools and the tone of voice have to be different. And instead of more of the same in terms of you just don't want it to be dismissed. Like, people say, well, Diane, we need a level playing field. I said, heck, if we need it, it's never going to happen. I just want to make sure I'm not benched because women are too easily dismissed by the majority of something that's male dominated, which is government for the most part. They're too easily dismissed. Men are looking at us all the time. How do I put her on the back bench? And it sounds like I'm downplaying men, but I don't say it negatively so much as it kind of is reality. The way that it is. It is what it is. And you can't be angry about it. It's just the way it is, and you have to figure out a way to fit in there and have your wins take place. And
to have that fire in the belly.
Fire in the belly.
To know what your ultimate goal is.
Absolutely.
And to just go for it.
And to go for it. And to do it, I mean, this is so corny. But you can do it in a noble way. You can. And your constituents deserve it. And that's the other thing about women. You have a really disillusioned public out there now. Really disillusioned.
Absolutely.
About the process and elections and who's running and who's winning and who's serving and who's making those decisions. And they're disillusioned. Women, whether we deserve it or not, often are trusted first. Now, you give them something not to trust, and then you've lost them. But polls will tell you that. They find women more trustworthy. If they say they're going to do it, then, so they'll go, I'm just going to vote for the woman because I don't trust those guys. They've gone nuts up there. So they give us a little pass. And I think women need to take advantage of it and support other women who are qualified. I'm not saying. And by the way, your first example of your friend, you can't just do it because you're a woman. And by the way, to use that as one of your rallying cries, it's not a good thing either. Well, I'll be the first woman, or I'll be there, because there's two ways. I did it not knowing that was in my future, because those weren't my issues, and then being recruited to at least think about it, and then went into it like this, and that was the only office I wanted to do because that's where I felt my competencies were. And then the other way is that more deliberative, intentional, growing and growing, and then all of a sudden you've got name recognition, you're on a couple of boards, you've made a couple of speeches to the Rotary, and all of a sudden oh, she's good. Hers is probably the one that will be the most successful. Let me just put it that way, that deliberate, intentional thing. But that's not to scare off anybody who's got her eye there. Get some mentors around you. Start showing up at things so that you think you have the tone of your community. Are you really? You think this issue is the most important? You walk 100 doors in a weekend, you go,
could be
everybody. Yeah. So get in touch with your community because you will be representing them. But man, if you've got the fire in the belly, I would just talk. This is back to your other friend. Talk to her. Nothing's worth a divorce over it. Let me just tell you that. But if they can hone their own communication down to really be honest with each other about how much it would hurt to be away from the house for those 3 months. I won't sugarcoat the money part of it. You'll never be paid enough. Well, I hear California has pretty good paying, $100,000 a year. I think I could get along with that. But that's usually not the case in serving the public. But it would only be for 4 years, and then you could take or 2 years if in some states. Whatever the term is, maybe that's the way to learn if the 3 months is a problem, to learn if the finances are just too burdened, to learn if your spouse can handle this. Just talk about it like it's only a 4-year period. I'm called to do this, my love. Mm-hmm. What do you think? Because I don't think you should ignore that voice in you that says, unless it's for the wrong reason. Now, if it's about you, forget it. I'll campaign against you. But if it's really because you know your skills and your desire to help people is going to make a difference. If that's the reason for the fire in the belly, man, I'd be the first one saying, let me help.
And whether it's politics or something else.
And that's true.
Right.
That's exactly true.
Right.
Because Beth, you know this to be true. You're happiest when you're doing something that you're good at, by the way.
And that you're passionate about.
And that you're passionate about. You follow that, and you personally are fulfilled.
Well, you also figure out how to be good at it if you have a passion for it.
Oh, no question.
So as we just wrap up here, tell me what it means to you to be bold. What being bold means.
Okay, this is easy.
Diane?
This is easy. Being bold, to me, it harks back to what I want for myself. And that is kind of what everybody wants. I want to be happy, and I want to live a life fulfilled. That means, and with a lot of people, pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. I'm not saying it's easy to play it safe. I'm just saying you push yourself out of your comfort zone, which is being bold for you, no matter what that is. Whether it's standing up to somebody you need to stand up to and haven't ever done that before, or whether it means taking a trip to Machu Picchu or climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. I mean, I'm thinking Beth is going to reach heaven. What's she going to do when she's up there? Because she's climbing that big old mountain. So it's getting out of your comfort zone, and it means being bold. You have to be bold to push yourself out of that comfort zone. But then when you do it, that is serving the purpose of making you happy and living a life fulfilled. And I can tell you, having been back, the Machu Picchu trip sort of crystallized it for me. And I've used this phrase, and I'm sorry I've even used it, as I'm so old at 68. That's not the case at all. Because guess what? In retirement, now that you've heard my continuum, in retirement, you can't stop being bold. And believe me, it gets easy. You kind of want to shrink back and say, well, let me rest, or let me get over the burnout, or let me put a nice little bucket list that means the spa once a week and an exotic trip once a month.
You've got to keep pushing yourself.
You do. But guess what? If you wait till you're 68 to do it, you're not used to it, and you're too tired to do it. If you're bold at 20, if you're bold at 30, you're never going to stop. And I don't want you to stop, because the excitement can still be there, whatever your abilities or disabilities are. And again, it's about happiness, and it's about fulfillment, and you can't do it where your comfort zone is all the time. You need to keep pushing, and to push, you have to be bold.
You know, I just got chills with that thought, because I love the fact that you talk about you've got, you do it at 20, you do it at 30, and you also, it's never too late.
Oh, so absolutely.
If you want to start at 50 or you want to start at 60, it is easier if you've started when you're younger, because you get used to it. But you've changed your baseline. And you have, question. At 68, you changed your baseline in terms of what you thought you could do. And now, hopefully, you're looking ahead at something else.
No question. And if you took that risk, because you could say sometimes being bold means taking a risk. And you are going to succeed when you take the risk more often than you're going to fail. And when you fail, you just learn new ways to succeed. So it's not really a failure. And so if you do that a little bit, you won't end up being retired as a single woman, whether she's widowed or divorced, and wonder why you're not getting that big retirement. Because you didn't ask for it way back then when it was too much of a risk. You didn't think you deserve. If you think you deserve it, you need to get your butt up to the boss and say, I deserve this. And then you retire at a level where you don't have to go be a greeter at Walmart. Not that that's, believe me, if that's
what there's anything wrong with it.
No, because I've told my kids I would be a greeter at Walmart and be happy doing it.
Well, you would just be talking to everyone.
Well, I would.
You'd be delighted to be meeting so many people.
I'm talking more about the financial stability, but when you're risk averse, it does affect your income once you retire too. And if you've never done it before, especially risked it and failed, because you know what? I know we're going long here, but you know what? Again, back to those list an adjective. Diane, list an adjective about leadership, because the woman's going, I've never thought of myself as a leader. And I go, well, give me a description of what you think a leader is. And they're going to put adjectives like bold, good public speaker, charisma, personality, and now they've got this list of adjectives. With me, it's not adjectives, it's verbs. It's like a circle. And here's where you are, and this is where you need to be for your constituents, for your company, for your nonprofit stakeholders, for who you're serving. Okay? And what you need more of, or most of, is there are speed bumps. Here. It's that person who can lead his or her followership through the speed bumps that gets there, which whatever that takes, it takes being able to motivate people. It takes being, in other words, it's verbs like, I don't want to put up barriers and have my protesters or my folks behind it. And I'm here with the bullhorn going, yeah. That's not leadership. Leadership is taking down the barriers, mingling with the people on the other side and going, what is your problem? And how can we fix this? And can we start with what we have in common, right? So it's more of a process of verbs. And most of it has to do with, some could say failing. For me, it's navigating the barriers. Okay, we did that one. Psst. And when you do that, guess what you're doing? Your followership gets bigger and bigger and bigger, because you are not saying we're giving up. We're just amending things a little bit. Anyone can do that. A quiet person that's been a stay-at-home mom can do that with the right cause and having people want to follow or listen to her. Although the biggest part of communication should be listening rather than talking. It unfortunately doesn't work that way. But I wouldn't want to discourage anybody, but they have to be practical about it. I'm anxious to see what happens with either one of your friends, by the way.
Me too. Yeah, me too.
I'll make sure
that they listen to this and they can get some ideas. So, Diane, thank you. Oh
my
gosh.
Thank you. I appreciate this. Yeah. As you can tell by my face, it's one of my favorite subjects. Is just letting women know they can do it.
Yeah,
they can do it.
Absolutely. Thank you for inspiring us all.
Well, I don't know if I inspired. I learned a lot. I failed a lot along the way too. Well, I didn't fail.
You learned.
I coped with a loss. Let's put it that way.
Diane, thank you so much. She amazes me in her dedication to serving people and being really genuine and realistic in terms of what it takes to be in politics. But that honesty can be carried over into many parts of our lives. We always have to weigh the risks and rewards of our choices. And she really lays it all out there. And she's just so positive and can-do about it all. I just loved that about our conversation. A reminder that if you like what you hear, please subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Play, and write a review or leave us some 5 stars on that. Those reviews and stars really do help the podcast get more exposure and will ultimately help us grow our Be Bold community. I bet you know a few people in your world who would also enjoy today's conversation and this podcast in general, so please do share. I'm working on launching a website dedicated to the podcast, but in the meantime, you can find out more about me by visiting wanderlustandlipstick.com as well as WanderTours.com, and that's where you'll see the tours I lead around the world, as well as our culinary tours to New Orleans, where I met up with Diane, Santa Fe, and here in Seattle. It's worth mentioning that soon you'll be able to purchase Be Bold gear and accessories, so stay tuned for that. I encourage you to check out the Wander World Foundation, the nonprofit I founded to help women and children in developing countries. I'll put links to all those sites in the show notes as well, and you can find those on wanderlustandlipstick.com/podcast. Sign up for my newsletter on the Wanderlust and Lipstick site, and you'll receive tips on making your travels more bold. You can friend me on Facebook, and I'm WanderGal on Instagram. If you know of any high-performing, adventurous, philanthropic women whom you think might be a good guest, shoot me a note or leave a comment. And finally, the ladies can join us on our Be Bold Facebook group. That's where you'll find our growing community. It's where we share goals, talk about our setbacks, and where you can find words of encouragement, wisdom, and inspiration from others. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Be Bold podcast. Until next time, be bold.